Britain argues that Brexit will make British agriculture greener. And the non-EU member Switzerland, for example, has a particularly high standard of animal welfare. So, is agriculture greener without the EU? Switzerland has one of the strictest animal protection laws in the world, for example. Farm animals are given more space and animal transports are allowed to take less time than in the EU. Battery keeping of chickens, foie gras, cutting of frogs' legs and neutering piglets without stunning are prohibited. Swiss agriculture is characterized by comparatively small farms and a high density of organic label farms. In addition, many subsidies are linked to ecological services or animal-friendly husbandry. EU law is not only less strict than Swiss law, it even creates negative incentives in some cases. If a European farmer renaturalizes part of his land, he has to expect that his subsidies will be cut because of the reduced arable land. The basic problem is that most of the European funding is distributed according to area, says Sven Giegold, German economist and Green politician in the European Parliament. The EU grants would not be tied to strict environmental or animal welfare requirements. And that is a false incentive in his view. This disincentive was also noticed in Great Britain, where even the Queen, as a large landowner, received EU agricultural subsidies. According to media reports, a Saudi billionaire received over 400,000 euros in agricultural subsidies from the EU in 2016 for breeding racehorses in the UK. The British government has promised to base the post-Brexit subsidies on ecology and animal welfare. There is actually a chance that British agriculture will become more ecological after Brexit, says Matthias Binswanger, Professor of Economics at the University of Applied Sciences, Northwestern Switzerland. The UK can reshape its agricultural policy the way the British want it to be. The British agricultural policy can be relaunched with an approach that takes more into account sustainable land use, biodiversity and conservation. Giegold sees it differently. According to the EU parliamentarian, it is still unclear whether Brexit will lead to more ecological agriculture. The British speak with a forked tongue, he says. They want to conclude free trade agreements with the whole world. These force the global price level onto the local market. At these prices, however, one cannot produce in Europe in an environmentally friendly and animal-friendly manner, not even in Great Britain. Boris Johnson probably does not yet know how to resolve this contradiction between ecology and free trade. There's also the opposite example, namely that EU membership has a positive effect on the sustainability of a country's agriculture. That was the case, for example, with Austria and Ireland. When they joined the EU, they had to realign their agriculture and cut subsidies. Austria is now referred to as Europe's delicatessen shop. Instead of mass-produced products, Austria is increasingly focusing on niches and higher quality products, says Patrick Dümmler from the business-oriented think tank Avenir Suisse. And Ireland is promoting the Origin Green label and is having success with sustainably produced food on the European market. In addition, there are also absurd false incentives in Switzerland. From an environmental point of view, lower meat consumption would be desirable, but Switzerland is pumping double-digit millions in taxpayers' money into the meat lobby. They're called Proviande in order to boost meat sales through advertising. Or another example, plant protection products are considered to be environmentally harmful, but still benefit from a significantly lower VAT rate in Switzerland, 2.5% instead of 7.7%. And another, when the federal government increased the summer contributions in 2014 to alleviate the economically precarious situation of the Alpine people, This led to a herbicide boom in the Swiss mountains. Because if the inspectors discover too many problem plants, the direct payments are reduced. And so what did the farmers do? They used as many herbicides as they could. According to Binswanger, Swiss agricultural policy is creating ever greater incentives for farmers to stop producing food and instead act as landscape gardeners and ecological administrators. And there he sees an unholy alliance. The economy would like to import cheap agricultural products from abroad and would be happy when a country like Switzerland no longer produces itself. The Greens and the ecological movements are mainly concerned with greenhouse gas reductions in agriculture. And these are reduced the more, the less is produced. That's true. But this makes it more difficult to promote local production with sustainably produced food. And the problem is simply shifted abroad, because if more goods have to be imported, land use and environmental pollution simply take place in other countries, not to mention the transport. Like Germany, Switzerland is not self-sufficient when it comes to land use, says Giegold. Agricultural production is globalized, also for countries like Switzerland. If we want to shape the impact of agriculture on the climate and animal welfare, then it can only be done globally. In other words, in a strong and united EU. Dümmler is also critical of the Swiss agricultural policy. The fact is that as Swiss taxpayers, we are pumping so much money into the agricultural sector and as consumers paying more for food than in any other European country. Despite these high costs, Swiss agriculture hardly achieves any of the environmental goals it has set. The environmental damage to agriculture in Switzerland is high. Avenir Swiss estimates it at 7.6 billion Swiss francs annually. Both the EU and Switzerland want to become greener. The EU with the European Green Deal, Switzerland with the AP22 Plus agricultural reform. The latter, however, was recently suspended. This means that environmental measures have also been put on the back burner, said Dümmler, who notes that there is more will in the EU for political reforms than in Switzerland. So, could the EU overtake Switzerland in terms of organic farming? Hardly, says Binswanger then. The Common Agricultural Policy of the EU, the CAP or CAP, is characterized by big announcements which are often followed by few concrete measures, he says. Ultimately, the EU will continue to promote intensive, highly productive agriculture as most payments continue to go to large industrial farmers. These payments are simply garnished with a little more sustainability and biodiversity, his opinion. Giegold is also only cautiously optimistic. Unfortunately, the Green Deal left the core of the Common Agricultural Policy outside. In the Farm to Fork strategy, a reduction in pesticides is planned. With this strategy, the EU Commission wants to make food production in the EU more sustainable. For example, fewer antibiotics and fertilizers should be used and organic farming should be promoted. So I assume that sooner or later the wishes for green agriculture will reach the Green Deal, but that will take a while, he says. Even if multilateralism, as with the Green Deal, can have a positive effect on environmental goals, international law is a stumbling block in other respects. In Switzerland, for example, the government and parliament refrain from banning the import of products that are cruel to animals because it does not fit into international law, and there the key word is free trade. A popular initiative is therefore planned because if the government and parliament buck, thanks to direct democracy in Switzerland, you can get the voters to help. But it's not the binding referendum stuff many critics here mean. I understand everyone in Switzerland who wants animal welfare standards not only at home, but also for imported products, says Giegold. I would advise every country to refer to the higher values in such conflicts and, if necessary, to accept that other countries threaten sanctions for their own values. Dümmler suggests resolving the conflict between international law and animal welfare simply by declaring the production conditions. The large retail chains in Germany uniformly label meat in 5 different grades based on the way the livestock is kept. That leaves the consumer the freedom of choice and does not violate any agreements. Binswanger once again sees it differently. I'm generally in favor of exempting agricultural products from free trade, as was generally accepted up to the Uruguay round under the GATT up to the 1980s, said the economic professor. Total free trade not only prevents the preservation of a producing agriculture in countries like Switzerland, but also makes it difficult to find independent solutions such as strict regulations on animal welfare. And just as a small comment, he is complaining about the WTO rules there, not EU law. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel and to my other channels. I'll see you in my next video. Auf Wiedersehen.